Hello, friends. Continuing through GodSword. Zephaniah chapter 2, God, Yahweh himself. He continues his prophecy with Jerusalem and Judah in the center of this prophecy, but he goes beyond. It's as if he then takes a look north, south, east, and west of Judah, and now prophesies against the pagan idolaters that are Israel's immediate neighbors. And he calls out, chapter 2, verse 1, gather yourselves together, indeed, gather, O nation without shame. Before the decree it takes effect, the day passes like the chaff. Before the decree takes effect, the day passes like the chaff. Before the burning anger of Yahweh comes upon you, before the day of Yahweh's anger comes upon you, seek Yahweh, all you humble of the earth, who have worked his justice. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be hidden in the day of Yahweh's anger. Hidden in the day of Yahweh's anger. That even here in the Old Testament, God speaks of a way to avoid, a way to escape that coming wrath, that wrath that will consume the burning anger of Yahweh against the chaff of the earth. He warns about it. And then he looks to the west. For Gaza will be forsaken, and Ashkelon a desolation. Ashdod will be driven out at noon, and Ekron will be uprooted. He looks directly west to the region of the Philistines, and he pronounces this judgment. And he continues, woe to the inhabitants of the seacoast. The nation of the Cherethites. It's the reference to the origin of the Philistines as a people from the region of Crete, the Cherethites. And he says, the word of Yahweh is against you, O Canaan, land of the Philistines, and I will make you perish, so that there will be no inhabitants. So the seacoast will be pastures, with caves for shepherds and folds for flocks. And the ghost will be for the remnant of the house of Judah. They will feed upon it, the houses of Ashkelon. They will lie down at evening, for Yahweh their God will care for them and restore their fortune. So, the prophesied judgment against the Philistines and against their land. Certain amount of irony, in light of the present reality, in light of the present day circumstance, that strip of land today in your headlines as the Gaza Strip, that includes that whole coastal stretch that should be beautiful, could be beautiful, if it were managed. It has been so not managed. It has been so mismanaged as to have been turned by Hamas into a moonscape of destruction. They've spent billions of dollars on a network of tunnels and weaponry, and have done anything except meet the needs of the Palestinians there in the region of Gaza. But long before the Palestinians, which ironically is the name, Palestine was the name given by the Romans, renaming the land, seeking to add insult to injury after completely destroying the revolution of the Jews in 70 AD. They exiled the people from the land, the Jews, and then renamed the land Palestine or Palestina. because that was their attempt to say Philistine. Israel's ancient and arch enemy were the Philistines. It was a political statement that was being made, but the irony is that there's such a tragedy there in Gaza. The people, sadly, the human shields for the cowards of Hamas. And they have invited the destruction with the war they initiated. They've invited the very destruction that Israel has rained upon Gaza. And so now there's talk, I'm sure, as of your watching this, there's talk about America rebuilding. That President Trump has a big idea about turning it into the Riviera of the Mediterranean. But long before the destruction of our president, there was, in fact, great destruction, and along with the rise of the Babylonian Empire, there was the absolute elimination of the Philistines. They're gone. There are no Philistines. And their land indeed became uninhabited. It became, instead of cities, it became pastures and fields for shepherds with caves for them to dwell in. But with regard to the remnant of the house of Judah, they will feed upon that land and the houses of Ashkelon. They'll lie down at evening, and Yahweh their God will care for them and restore their fortune. Now, verse 8, I've heard the reproach of Moab and the revilings of the sons of Ammon. Now, there's an irony that both of those peoples, identifiable peoples, both the Moabites and the Ammonites, are the descendants of Lot, Abraham's nephew, through an incestuous conception. They became enemies of Israel, even though neighbors, enemies. I've heard the revilings of the reproach of the sons of Ammon, with which they reproach my people, and magnify themselves against their territory. Therefore, as I live, declares Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, surely Moab will be like Sodom, and the sons of Ammon like Gomorrah, a place possessed by nettles and salt pits, and a perpetual desolation. The remnant of my people will plunder them, and the remainder of my nation will inherit them. So there is today no Moabite. There are no Ammonites. The people of Moab and Ammon are gone. There is a city called Ammon. That's all. It is the capital of the kingdom of Transjordan. There's a Jordan, but there are no Ammonites. And yet there is an Israel, because God promised a remnant of them. And verse 10, this they will have in return for their pride, because they have reproached and magnified themselves against the people of Yahweh of hosts. Yahweh will be fearsome to them, for he will starve all the gods of the earth, and all the coastlands of the nations will bow down to him, everyone from his own place. Then he looks to the south. He went from the west to the Moabites and the Ammonites in the east, and now he looks southward. You also, O Ethiopians, you also, O Ethiopians, will be slain by my sword. And he will stretch out his hand against the north, and cause Assyria to perish. He will make Nineveh a desolation. So there's that prophecy that tells us that Nineveh will be destroyed, even as Nahum prophesied. And so that does tell us that Zephaniah prophesies before all of that. So again, that's how we can sort of date this. He'll make Nineveh a desolation, parched, like the wilderness. Flocks will lie down in her midst. All the beasts of the nation, both the pelican and the hedgehog, will lodge in the tops of her pillars. Their voice will sing in the window. Ruin will be on the threshold, for he has laid bare the cedar work. This is the exultant city which inhabits securely, who says in her heart, I am, and there is no one beside me. This was the boast of Nineveh. So again, from the Ethiopians south, he looks north to the Assyrians, and the boasting of Nineveh. How she has become an object of horror, a resting place for beasts. Everyone who passes by her will hiss and wave his hand in contempt. So Zephaniah prophesies, long before these things are fulfilled, of a judgment that is coming that will involve Judah, Jerusalem, and every nation in the four directions from them. And indeed, the rising empires would see to it that these smaller empires would be destroyed. It would come to nothing. And indeed it was fulfilled. But again, I mentioned to you now, at the end of our study for today, that there is a judgment coming, still a judgment pending upon the whole world. The judgment will come. God has promised it. He has warned it will in fact come, but he has made a way for everyone to avoid it. God has made a way for whosoever will. And I remind you again, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever would believe in him, whosoever believeth in him, would not perish, but have everlasting life. Yeah, amen. Questions or comments? ccbangor.org. Bangor, that's Bangor. Okay. Calvary Chapel, Bangor. ccbangor.org. I said that wrong. Let me see if I can do it again. ccbangor.org. Send your emails to that, okay? Thanks for taking the time and going through this with me. We'll pick up where we left off in our next study with chapter 3. Grace and peace to you all.